But in this book, Going Local, it's written by Michael Schumann. It says, creating self-reliant communities in a global age. Let me just, I talked about being poor. People are, oh, black people are poor and, we don't have any money. We can't do this and we can't do all these things you talk about, Jim. We can't start businesses. We don't have access to capital and all these kinds of things, many of which are true in terms of access to capital, access to information, access to opportunity. So what do we do about it? Sit around and continue to wring our hands? What do we do about it? How did all the other black businesses that were in this country before integration, how did they get started? How have all of the other businesses since then gotten started and have grown? How has that happened? Some of them happened because people pooled their resources. They came up with innovative and creative ways to raise money to start businesses. And we can't just sit back and say, well, the banks won't make me no loan, so I can't do anything. Now, if you stop there, and I said this in my speech this week at Tuskegee, or last week rather, that you may hear no 50 times before you hear that 51st answer that says yes. The main reason our businesses go out of business is that the owner quits. I quit because I couldn't get a loan from the bank. I quit because I didn't want to work 12 hours a day. I quit, it's always something why I quit. I told my daughter, I try to send her some little tidbits of inspiration every now and then. She's away in college at Howard University. And I sent one that said, the best angle from which to attack a problem is the triangle. Triangle. And if we don't try to do what we say we need and what we want to do, it'll never happen. And sometimes that triangle is filled with stumbling blocks and ditches and obstacles of all sorts. But we need to turn our stumbling blocks into stepping stones and move forward, because nobody's coming, nobody's riding down our streets in our neighborhoods on a white donkey or a white elephant to save us. We have to save ourselves, and we can take the lessons from the past to do that. I'm scheduled to speak in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street, brothers and sisters, on October the 6th. And again, that's some more hallowed ground. Every time I go there and go to Black Wall Street, the area where Black Wall Street was, I think about all the businesses that were there. There were 600 different businesses there in Black Wall Street. These people did what they had to do to support themselves and build up their own businesses. Now, most of you have heard the story by now about it being torched, burned to the ground, the whole community, every business, every home burned to the ground, because I guess they were doing a little bit too well, making a little bit too much money back there in 1921, and folks didn't like that. So they came up with this crazy excuse to go in and burn it down and to kill hundreds and hundreds of people. But I'll be back there in Tulsa, God willing, on October the 6th, speaking about this kind of thing and celebrating the progress that has been made since that tragic time in 1921. I've met some of the survivors of that Tulsa riot, and they're well up in age now, and they have never been, their families still have never been compensated for their losses, their family losses back in 1921. So it's something that we just need to teach, first learn ourselves, and then teach our children about it, because all the things that we're trying to do today, there are lessons in the past that we can look to help us do what we say we need to do today. In this book, talking about folks being poor and everything, here's a quote. Being poor doesn't always mean being without resources. Now it points out that Anacostia, those of you who are familiar with Washington, D.C., there's an area called Anacostia. He says Anacostia is one of the poorest neighborhoods in Washington, D.C., yet the total income of all its households is $370 million a year. Y'all call that poor? Most of this money quickly departs in the hands of landlords, business owners, and bankers who live in more upscale parts of town. The thriving stores like Safeway, CVS Drugs, Popeyes, and Amoco are all part of regional or national chains. Some small local shops are doing well. Hair salons, liquor stores, and bars seem ubiquitous. That means they're everywhere. And you know how that is. But the many boarded up storefronts on the main thoroughfare stand as if tombstones to past economic development efforts gone bad. When President Bill Clinton spoke to a luncheon of the Rainbow Coalition in 1992, he said, in the Washington, D.C. area, there are 50 major banks, but only 2 have branches in Anacostia. And neither of them has a lending office. Isn't that something? $370 million in the hands of these poor people in Anacostia and no lending office. Why not? It's obvious to me. I don't need to lend you anything. I'm going to get that $370 million anyway through our businesses. So I don't need to be making loans to you because you're not leveraging the $370 million to your own advantage. You're sitting on potential power. That's a dumb term, but that's what you're sitting on with $370 million, and you're still poor. You have accepted that. Why would I be interested in having a lending institution there? I'm going to get that money anyway. He went on to say, new branches of several regional banks have opened since, but those Anacostians who maintain savings or checking accounts must accept that most of their money is being invested in the swankier part of town, or even hundreds of miles away. The lucky few with pensions place them in the hands of mutual fund managers who probably haven't even heard of Anacostia. Residents speak longingly and bitterly of money that has come and gone. Do you see? This kind of captures what I'm talking about, the power of local investing. But if your investing is in folks who don't even have a stake in where you live, again, your street, your neighborhood, your community, your city, money is coming in and leaving, it's not doing anything for you. It's helping those folks who don't have any stake in where you live. And that's what this is all about, this going local and local investing and understanding the power of our dollars. If they made some sense. I always say our dollars don't make any sense. And we can get mad, we can complain, we can do everything. But if we don't understand and then exercise the leverage that comes with the dollars that we have in our so-called poor neighborhoods, what's the point? Bishop Luke Edwards down in Alabama, back in early 70s, had a church, and one day he said, hey, we're not going to preach today, we're not going to sing and dance and all these. He said, I want to know how much money we have in this congregation. And most of the folks, nearly 100% of the folks in that congregation were on food stamps. So they wrote down how much they get in food stamps, put it in a hat, passed it forward, they added it all up. And when they added up the total, he said, this is how much money we get every month. This is how much money goes through our hands in this congregation. So what they decided to do back then was to buy some peanuts and sell those peanuts on the street to people and pool the money, put the money back into the pool. 10, 15 years later, they owned thousands of acres of land. They had streets on which they had built their own homes. The whole street was theirs. They had an amusement park. They had a K-12 school. They had a meat processing plant, fully computerized. They had farms with livestock. All of these things. They had a convenience store the size of a Walmart. They had small, I shouldn't say a convenience store, a Walmart-sized store where they had everything, all the same things that Walmart has. They owned several convenience stores with gas stations, and they owned three hotels, small, motel, hotel type places in 3 different cities after 15 years. Now, they understood the power of the collective and leveraging that. They were poor. They did it with food stamps to start out with. They were poor, but they used their meager resources to build up to what they ended up with a couple of decades later. I'm not suggesting that we go and set up a model, because he used a little known IRS classification to do that. If you need information about it, you can call me. I can tell you about that. But the larger concept here is collective economics. It's leverage. It's support of one another. And it is investing locally. That's the larger thought here. And we need to think more like that. So we're poor, we're complaining, we can't get this, we can't get that, the banks won't lend us money. I teach in my business planning class, there's 7 ways to raise money, and the first one is yourself. The second is family and friends. The 7th one is a bank. Now, you know today, these banks, even though they got bailed out with your money, they're not lending money to start up businesses. What are you going to do? Quit? Jobs are gone. People are laid off. The jobs are not coming back. You're going to quit, or you're going to be an entrepreneur? You're going to go out and do something for yourself. Your choice. But if we would look at the power of the collective and the power of local investing, and using whatever dollars we have to help create a local business circle, starting new businesses and growing those businesses to the point to where we can hire our children and other folks who are unemployed, we'd be much better off. And you say, how can we do that? This book talks about several organizations that were formed to deal with that particular problem. And while I don't have enough time to go into explain the details of, the structure of these organizations, you can do some research on it and find out. But they're innovative, creative ways that have been around for years. And guess what? Black people did this many, many, many years ago. They created organizations called SUSUs. And it was really just a kind of a revolving loan program. It was a cooperative fund. People could take money from and start businesses and build their business up and then go and help someone else. So we're talking about something that African Americans have done, and Africans did long before they even got to this country. But here are a couple of examples. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Grameen Bank model that was started in Bangladesh. You might need to check that out. It's spelled G-R-A-M-E-E-N. Now, there may be some limited, the application for that may be more limited here in the United States because of the regulations and everything else that we have here. But they did open up a branch of the Grameen Bank in the Bronx, New York, a couple of years ago. So somebody has taken note of that and brought it to this country. And on its particular level, it works. And you might want to look into that. There are other organizations. There was one called the Women's Self-Employment Project, and that was in Chicago. Provide loans to single mothers committed to starting their own businesses and leaving the welfare rolls. The Women's Self-Employment Project. And then there was another one, Working Capital. That's a nonprofit program based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Started in 1991. And there are many of these lending circles, as they're called, throughout this country. On the reservations, in other kinds of ethnic enclaves, people get together, pool their resources, and do what they have to do to take care of one another. And they invest in one another, locally. I'm reminded of this song, Stormy Monday Blues. And I think about it all the time when it comes to our dollars. And it says, the eagle flies on Friday, and Saturday I go out to play. And Sunday I go to church. And I fall down on my knees and say, Lord, have mercy on me. What nerve. The eagle flies on Friday. Yeah, it flies away from us. We get paid and the eagle flies away. It's gone, never to return. And then on Saturday we go out to play, and Sunday we begging again. oh, I spent all my money, I'm in bad shape, Lord help me get out of this. Stormy Monday blues. And you think about the words of that song and it reminds me, and it may remind you, of what we do with our dollars. Our dollars don't make any sense, brothers and sisters.